It's complicated. That's what the CNN anchor stated in this YouTube video about the Queen Remembered. They asked Zane Asher about the feelings of some who were part of the British Empire by force. Listen to her words and my later comments. This is Addie Banks, and this is my report.
CNN international anchor Zane Asher joins us now. And Zane, there's dissonance because you have the reverence for the Queen across the world, some of it very personal, but you also have awareness of Britain's colonial history, some of which still lives on today in the Commonwealth, of which there is real opposition to and upset. Larry Madowo was discussing that earlier. You're from a Nigerian family, grew up in the UK. Help explain that contradiction. I wonder how you personally view that.
I would say that the relationship that a lot of Black people who are British by birth and who have African ancestry, the relationship that a lot of us have with the royal family is certainly a complicated one. On the one hand, growing up in the UK, you are taught that the royals are the pinnacle of British high society. You are taught respect and reverence for everything that the crown and the scepter stands for. And also, by the way, for my own sort of personal situation, if you are a child of immigrants, you grow up in the UK, you crave that sense of belonging, and there is an understanding throughout your entire life that the monarchy is really what unites the nation. On the other hand, though, you're also aware, you're taught in school, you learn on your own a little bit more about the sort of darker history of colonialism. Yeah. The British Empire was part of the greatest colonial experiment the world has ever known. And you think about what colonialism actually involves, Jim, it is ugly business, okay? Yeah. The business of subjugating people by force is a brutal one. I grew up with stories of, villages in Nigeria being burned, precious artifacts being looted. Obviously, a lot of people dying through that entire process. I think that when it comes to Queen Elizabeth specifically, there is an understanding and there is an awareness that she ascended to the throne in 1952. And so she was much more involved and sort of, she oversaw much more the sort of breakdown of the British Empire and not the building of it. And I think that's a really important point to sort of take into consideration. She hasn't fought change as much as she could have. So I think that if there is this sort of lingering sense of resentment by some people of color, because obviously I can't generalize with 2 million people that live in the UK, 2 million Black people that live in the UK. If there is some resentment, I think that it is towards the monarchy, not necessarily the Queen, and there is a distinction, the monarchy versus the Queen.
Important. That is such a helpful explanation and such an important distinction. So one of the things that Larry reported on last hour that I think is important is real anger among some that she did not apologize for the actions of the empire building. But the new monarch can't. I mean, there are things now, the question will be, what will King Charles do? And what may be said that wasn't said?
I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see whether this sort of Commonwealth experiment survives the new king. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I think that, you saw last year Barbados, for example, removing the Queen as head of state. You are seeing growing calls for republicanism in various other sort of Commonwealth nations, especially in the Caribbean. And I think it's this idea that there is now an understanding of how much money the royal family may have made from slavery, their involvement in sort of colonialism, and there are calls for reparations, right? And even if the reparations are unlikely to happen, you sort of do get this sense that, it's unfortunate that there's been no apology. And that's what people really do take issue with, I think, at this point.
Since the passing of Queen Elizabeth, we have seen the world join England in mourning and celebration of a life of service. We have also heard some negative sentiments expressed by those in countries victim of British Empire colonialism. We're reminded again and again that old wounds may never heal, be they the Pope visiting Native Canadians with an apology for past atrocities, or Ghana apologizing for their involvement in the slave trade. But what other wealthy African nations have offered apology to Black American descendants of slavery? Zane Asher gave some insight into the complications around African Britons and the ugly business of killing and subjugating Nigerians, as well as the nobility growing wealthy in the slave trade. It was hurtful hearing her elders discuss entire villages burned and villagers killed. How many years was Nigeria colonized? The British Empire took over Nigeria from the mid 19th century until 1960. When they achieved independence. British influence tied to ending the slave trade with the prohibition of the trade in 1807 was met by many African nations resisting because slavery built their wealth. Asher mentioned reparations sought by British slave plantation states, but have we had discussions about reparations from now wealthy African countries? They talk about the diaspora of Pan-Africanism, brothers and sisters, but ignore the hundreds of years of atrocities we listened to growing up. Do I sense hypocrisy here? Do Black lives matter to everyone?